Here's a ride from about 4 years ago. It's kind of one of my favorite pavement rides. It's riding up the Mad River Road up to the Tyee Fire Lookout. So a little bit of background. This is a ride I did August of 2020. I had the bike for a year before I did this ride, and once I got up to the lookout, you hear me mention how I finally got the bike dirty. Well, this literally was the first or second ride that I did on the bike in the dirt. I had the bike for about a year before I finally got around to riding it. So the reason for that is my general practice is to get a bike completely outfitted and geared up and accessorized the way that I want it before I start riding it. And the reason for that is because it's a whole lot easier to work on a pristine, clean bike instead of one that's already been ridden and covered with dust, dirt, grime, etc. So I bought the bike in August of 2019 and literally had it a year before I finally started riding it in the dirt. Only riding I did to it that first year that I had it was just a handful of rides around the house to get enough break-in miles on it to be able to do that first initial oil change. So this ride up to Tyee Lookout, it's a nice twisty paved road. It follows the Mad River for quite a ways, and then it gains elevation pretty quick once we kind of depart from where we're following the river. There's a couple of different side roads that you can take that are dirt, either off to the left or off to the right, further up here once we're up into the higher elevations, and those basically parallel the pavement, kind of go off to one side or the other and meander around the hills and then connect back into this paved road. Quite a ways up, the paved road does eventually turn to dirt, and then the further up you get, the worse condition that road becomes. It's not all that great of a road for a bigger bike once you get into that more technical and challenging terrain quite a ways up. I think, if I remember right, most of it is pretty good. It's just about the last 2 miles or so, maybe only the last mile to a mile and a half that are kind of challenging. It's sort of littered with a lot of big rocks and boulders and whatnot. Coming up here on the left side, just around this corner right here where that little sign is, there's a campground down in there. It's called the Pine Flats Campground. It's not a very big campground, and it's primitive. I'm not real sure if there's a hand-operated water pump down there or not, or if there's even any outhouses. It's been so long since I've been down there, I can't remember. But there is also a trailhead down there, but that trail doesn't go all the way through to the top of the ridge because back in 2018, 2 years before I did this ride, those bridges burned out during a big forest fire. And then as we get up this road further where we're not in this little canyon, I'll probably point out some of the areas off to the left side where you can see remnants of that forest fire. It came up close to the road in a few places. In fact, there's a tree right there that's been burned. It kind of jumped some of the ridges and hit some of these trees right along the road, and then the further up we get, the more evidence you can see of that fire off to the left. And there's some areas where it absolutely completely incinerated everything in its path. I wish I would have had a drone and I could have flown it out over some of those areas to get a really good visual perspective of how badly it incinerated everything. It got super, super hot. All you could see was just nothing but gray everything. This is definitely a fun little twisty road to go up. I've done it a number of times. Prior to this, I think it's probably been close to at least 15 years since I was up here last. So it was kind of neat to get up here and ride this again. The video isn't too bad from this helmet camera that I'm running, but the audio is pretty pathetic because the camera does not have the capability for an external mic. So all I was doing was running the mic on the camera, and the camera was mounted on top of my helmet, so it was exposed quite a bit. We picked up a lot of wind noise, so I've kind of got the volume turned down quite a bit to sort of get rid of a lot of that wind noise. And this was the first year that I had started running a helmet cam. And the camera that I'm running is a GoPro Hero Session 5, which is a neat little camera because it's so compact, but the fact that we can't run an external mic kind of it shows its limitations on what it's good at and not so good at. This would be a really good camera to mount on my handlebars and just have a perspective pointing back at me, which I've actually done some in later years. I think the first time I was up to this lookout was either in 1997 or 1998 when I was on a dual sport ride that came up here and did some sections of trail that take off from where the lookout is, or fairly close to the lookout. And I've probably only been up here about 2 times since then, prior to this ride. Over the years, I've had 2 different DR350s. I know one of those DR350s has been up here, and then during the time that I've had this KTM, I've also had a 2002 DRZ 400, which I still have, and it has been up to this lookout at least once as well. Back at the beginning of this video where I was taking a left turn to go up this road, that intersection is about 2.5 miles or so from the little store, Cooper store in Ardenvohr, which is one of the gas stops on the Washington Backcountry Discovery Route, also known as the WABDR, WABDR. So this run up to Tyee Lookout is a really quick and easy side trip if you've got time and wanted to do something scenic and fun by running up to this lookout. So right up here is one of those optional side roads, I think. Here is a road that goes off to the right and kind of winds its way around on the right side off to the paved road, and then hooks back up with the paved road quite a ways up here. It's not uncommon to see rocks or boulders or whatnot roll down off of some of these side hills and land on the road, so every time I come up here I'm always real cautious and watch out for that. And then a lot of times we have some of this green shrubbery that kind of tends to grow out over the road just a little bit too. And then just back there was a road that took off to the left, so that's another optional little side route where you can meander out through the dirt a little bit and see here's more of that green shrubbery that kind of encroaches on the pavement. And we can also see some of the trees that have been hit by the most recent fire 2 years prior to this ride. And we get up here, and then that entire hillside over on the left also burned during that last forest fire. At various points along this road there's little turnouts and wide spots and kind of pull-offs where it's not surprising to see people camped up here during the latter part of September and into October and early November because of hunting season. further up this road we get, the more patches of burnt trees we see off to the left side. Just up around this bend you can see that gray spot. That's where the landscape completely got incinerated because the fire was so hot. Some of the areas have actually grown back just a little bit, and then further up here you can also see some completely incinerated locations as well. This area right here got completely scorched as well. And here the road splits. If we were to go to the left, I believe the road dead ends at a gate, and then there's also a trail up there. And then the right turn here is the route to the lookout. As soon as the road turns to dirt, it actually is a fairly nice, flat, even surface. But the further up we get, the more, I guess, technical or challenging or rough the road gets. And it's just the last few miles that kind of deteriorate, and then about the last mile and a half or so, it gets pretty rocky. Just beyond this intersection here is where the road kind of goes into its first level of deterioration. We have some ruts coming up, and you can kind of see where we've got a little bit of a sort of more of a two-track appearance road, and there's a lot of embedded rocks and whatnot. And then we can see some rocks that kind of tend to roll down off of the bank in some areas too. Just up ahead here we have a pretty hard right-hand switchback which is full of embedded rocks, so this is something you definitely got to watch out for and be ready to balance yourself and get on the throttle to get around that corner. Here we have another right-hand switchback coming up that's full of embedded rocks as well, just like the last one. The worst of the route is coming up here just as we go around the switchback. Only thing that makes it more difficult is it's a little bit steeper, and then we have a lot of loose rock and a lot of embedded rock in the road, and we kind of have to pick a good line and just watch out for oncoming traffic if you're up here during an event or a rally of some sort. Well, she's dirty now. And scratched up. Oh, dang it.